What's up, guys? Welcome back to another video. Happy Wednesday. Hope you're having a good week so far. And today I have a devotional thought for us out of 1 Corinthians chapter 6 verses 19 and 20. And I'm going to talk about our bodies being the temple of the Holy Spirit. So I'm going to read 1 Corinthians 6, 19 through 20. It says, "Do you not know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit, who is in you, whom you have received from God? You are not your own. You were bought at a price. Therefore, honor God with your body." So, with this idea that we are temples of the Holy Spirit is the part of God that is His active presence, His active living presence here on earth. It is God, an equal part of God in the Trinity, but the part of God that we can encounter, we can experience, a part of God that lives in us. The Holy Spirit is God's active living presence inside of every believer. If you are a Christian, you have the Holy Spirit living inside of you. And just as 1 Corinthians chapter 6 says, you are a temple of the Holy Spirit. The presence of God is living and residing inside of you. Therefore, we should honor God and treat our bodies as if that is true. So, with that being said, we need to hold our bodies as temples of the Holy Spirit with reverence and with respect for God's presence that lives inside of us. It's funny, I've grown up in the church my whole life, and something I hear all the time is, "Oh, I would say this, but we're in church, so I wouldn't say it right now." Or, "Oh, how could you say that? We're in church right now." Or, "What? You can't do that. We're in church right now." And it's funny how people clearly have a certain respect and reverence for the presence of God when it comes to a church building. People recognize a church building as a place that is holy and set apart for God, for His presence. You know, that's a place that you don't compromise, you don't mess with. But then as soon as we step out of the church walls, the church building, we can let some things fly under the radar. It's okay, because it's different, you know. But knowing that our bodies as believers, we are the temple of God's presence. We are the temple of the Holy Spirit. Knowing that, we need to have the same reverence and even fear, if you want to say, of God's presence that we have when we're inside of a church building. The way that we treat God's presence and the reverence we have for Him should not change whether we're inside of a church building or not. The same presence that is in a church building lives in us. And so that changes things. When you live your life recognizing that the presence of God is physically living in you, it changes things. It changes your perspective a little bit, changes the way that you live, it affects the decisions that you make. Because it's pretty disgusting to think of committing sexual sin or lying or cheating or stealing or any sin for that matter. It's pretty horrific thinking of doing that inside of a church. Who would do that, right? We don't compromise that. That's a very set aside and holy place. But why do we not have the same attitude, the same reverence for our own bodies, the very place where God's presence lives? If anything, we should have even more reverence for our own bodies, because they are the place where God's presence resides. The reason why we are able to have such reverence for a church building is because it is full of people who the Holy Spirit is living inside of. So I want to challenge us this week to remember to live our lives with the perspective that we are carriers of God's presence. Let's remember that God lives within us, that we are the temple of God's Holy Spirit, and that we need to treat our own bodies with reverence, and that we need to make decisions accordingly, that we should not sin against our own bodies. We should not sin because if we are to sin, we're sinning against the very temple of God's Spirit. And so we need to recognize that and take that seriously and hold God's temple with high reverence and respect. So just remember that this week you are carriers of God's presence. Remember that in the way that you live your life personally, but also remember that in the way that you are representing God. You carry Christ with you everywhere that you go, in your workplace, in your daily life, when you're with your family, your friends, wherever you are carrying the Holy Spirit with you. And so remember that, live your life with that in mind this week. So just a little challenge for you guys this week, just something I wanted to remind us of and want us to take seriously. Let's not forget who lives in us and just the high call that is on our lives because of the Holy Spirit that's living within us. So just remember that this week. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next week for another video, and see you this Saturday for small groups. Hope to see you there.